All of us need a reality check from time to time. That's a revelation of the way things are rather than the way we assume them to be. Maybe failing a midterm last month was a reality check because your fantasy of staying up late every night and cramming the night before was destroyed. Or maybe talking with your dad last week was a reality check because you know he hadn't been feeling well and had some tests done, and rather than reveal the results, he wanted to wait until you got home for break. Those reality checks destroy these fantasies that we can do it on our own and figure it out our own way, or that people in our lives are invincible or always going to remain. And this declaration of Jesus that he is the way, the truth, and the life is made in the midst of a broader reality check for his disciples. They have a fantasy that he is going to remain no matter what, that he is going to be some ruler of some type that overtakes all the other rulers with which they are dealing. And Jesus is giving them a reality check by declaring that he is going to be taken from them, that he is going to be made a sacrifice, that he will even be killed. And they don't know what to make of that. It's this extended description that we find in that part of John. And the disciples are really wrestling with that. And in the midst of that, Jesus makes this declaration, and then he says to them, "You know the way to the place where I am going." And one of the disciples responds to him, "We don't know the way. We don't know what you're talking about. We don't understand the expressions that you have for us. None of this reality check makes sense." And Jesus declares, "I am the way." Not, "I have the way, and I'm going to give it to you." Not, "I will show you the way, and you just need to do some things." But Jesus declares, "I am the way. I am the one doing it and accomplishing it." And then he declares, "I am the life." It's this expression that he is the source of all life, that he was there at creation, that he will be the resurrection, that any life we have and experience is because of Jesus. And in the midst of those two declarations, "I am the way and I am the life," he says, "I am the truth." And we tend to think about that as an antonym to lie. I am the truth as opposed to a lie. But the word for truth there in John is really a word that means reality. I am the reality of what is happening as opposed to the fantasy that you might imagine. And so that is Jesus' expression to his disciples, and by extension, to us. People that may have our own fantasies, that think we have it figured out. There was a moment that I had been introduced to a young guy by mutual friends. The friends believed that he needed to have a spiritual discussion, perhaps even a reality check. He did not believe that. And as we were introduced, he expressed to me that he really didn't want to talk with anybody about faith or God or any of that because he pretty much had it figured out. And my response was, "That's great that you got it figured out. Describe that to me." And he said, "Well, the deal is that, I'm a pretty good person. And so when it comes to God and heaven and all that stuff, I got it figured out. I'm pretty good. I do more good than bad, and it's going to all work out for me." My response to him was, "Well, that's great that you believe in God and heaven and all those things. Tell me more about that. Because you just referenced God, so tell me something about God." And the young guy had this quizzical expression. And I'm like, "Anything you want, any description of God." He's like, I don't know, he's God. I said, well, give me something more than that. He's like, he's great and awesome and godly. And I said, would you even say that God is perfect? And he thought about that for a few minutes, and he's like, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's God, right? You know, if any being is perfect, it's God. So yeah, God is perfect. Whatever God does is the way it ought to be. And I'm like, that's great. That's fantastic. And tell me a little bit more about heaven. And he's like, well, I don't know. It's awesome. That's where God is. I'm like, okay. Any description? He goes, it's great. It's nice. There's puffy clouds, angels, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, terrific. Would you say that heaven is perfect? And he thought about that for a few minutes. And he responded that it probably was. You know, that's this perfect place. Nothing's going to go wrong. We're all going to be okay. God's there. We don't deal with all the stuff that we deal with here. So he's like, yeah, you know, heaven's perfect. So I'm like, great. So God is perfect and heaven is perfect. And you believe that you are going to get there and hang out with him because you're pretty good. That was his reality check. He really had never thought about that. And I went on to express that if God is perfect and heaven is perfect, then it would seem to me that the only way to get there is to be perfect. And he didn't resonate with that because he knew enough to recognize that he wasn't. And that's all right, because neither am I, and neither are you. But then this guy who thought he had it all figured out started to hear about the one who has it all figured out, the one who is perfect on our behalf. There are thousands of religious teachings across the globe. And though they may have different holy books, they highlight different prophets, there are different histories associated with each, most have the same message. You are the way. You need to figure it out. You need to do certain things. You need to live up to certain expectations. You need to observe these rituals. You need to achieve a measure of enlightenment. You need to improve yourself. You need to discover the next level. If you want to have any experience with the divine or realize anything that may be described as heaven or paradise or eternity, you are the way. Your next life is entirely dependent on what you do with this life. And that's the truth. That's what every religious teaching would declare to you, except this teaching of Jesus. I am the way. I have done what you cannot do. I have been perfect on your behalf. I have never messed up, never sinned, and I am the life, sacrificing my very own for you on a cross, paying for your sin, and then rising from the dead, demonstrating that because I live forever, you will too. And that is the truth. That is the reality of the way this works. It does not happen any other way except through Jesus. The fascinating thing about that expression, reality check, is that it inevitably seems like a bad thing. A reality check is a bad thing because it means that you've messed stuff up, you need to get adjusted, your perspective has to be different. But Jesus redeems that phrase just as he redeems all things. Reality check becomes a good thing with Jesus. Because the person who failed their midterm because they thought they had it all together and could do it their own way and may think that about other parts of their life and insist on doing it a certain way without regard for God or anybody else who believes they have it all figured out, the reality is that he is your way. He forgives you for that. He grabs hold of you. He gives to you what he has done rather than making it about what you have done. The one who's nervous about a discussion with dad when they get home for break and about his health and well-being. The one who's anxious about dad who has always seemed so invincible, and maybe he won't always be. Jesus is your life. He is the assurance that life lasts beyond this, that there's no disease or ailment or even death itself that will prevent us from living forever with him. That's the reality check. That is the truth. And it is far better than any fantasy we may have. In the name and for the sake of Jesus.